Hey guys, it's Stephanie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about Luke Skywalker and how the Disney canon got him wrong. However, that's going to be at the end. I'm going to be using this book, some of the things that Joseph Campbell talked about, and we're going to discover the mythological and legend basis for Luke, the things that George Lucas looked at and thought about when he created the character. And I really this is going to be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of archetypes that people don't really think about when they watch Star Wars. It's not just a piece of pop culture. It is a little bit, I think, a little bit beyond that because of how it's resonated and timeless and still is throughout the 40 years that we have known its existence. And I want to share you what I've learned through this and from Joseph Campbell and George Lucas, and then we'll talk about how Disney went off the rails again. So this is who Luke Skywalker is and his heroic journey and what he should have become and how Disney got it wrong. All the life potentialities that we never managed to bring to adult realization, those other proportions of ourself are there in the internal world. For such golden seeds do not die. If only a portion of that lost totality could be dredged up into the light of day, we should experience a marvelous expansion of our powers, a vivid renewal of life. We should tower in stature. Moreover, we could dredge up something forgotten, not only by ourselves, but by the whole generation or our entire civilization. We should become indeed the boon bringer, the cultural hero of the day, a personage of not only local, but of world historical moment. If we look at Luke Skywalker's story in this light, the light that Joseph Campbell wrote in the aforementioned paragraph, its meaning begins to glow. Luke's journey through the 3 films transforms him from a rebellious and impatient teenager, itching for adventure, into a grown-up hero who has confronted his strengths and weaknesses and found the power to help save the world. Along the way, he encounters ogres and wizards, mazes and traps, the archetypal symbols of the hero's journey. In tracking his voyage, we will identify all the classical elements that help to make a myth of Star Wars. In myth, heroes are almost always drawn from the extremes of life. They are often either princes or paupers. Sometimes the hero is the child of a distinguished parents. The father is, say, a king or a lord, but because of some difficulties surrounding the child's birth, such as a prophecy or a curse, he or she is sent far away into the wilderness or wasteland to be reared in humble circumstances. For example, the royal twins, Romulus and Remus, the eventual founders of Rome, were suckled by a wolf and reared by a shepherd. Perseus, the son of the great god Zeus, and Princess Danae, was brought up in a fisherman's hut until he was old enough to set out on his own adventures, which included slaying the evil monster Medusa. Similarly, at the beginning of Star Wars: A New Hope, Luke Skywalker is a poor farm boy living with his foster parents, his uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, Lars, on the remote desert planet of Tatooine. It will be quite some time before he discovers his royal lineage. Now, we know that Luke is the son of Anakin Skywalker, Master Jedi, and Padme Amidala, Queen of Naboo, and he has a twin sister, Leia Organa, who is a princess of Alderaan. Now, both of these children were separated and hidden away from their father after he turned to Darth Vader, Obi-Wan taking Luke to his aunt and uncle, and Bail Organa and his wife adopting Leia. So let's talk about Luke. As the trilogy opens, Luke is the Fool, the first card in the tarot deck, which is an ancient fortune-telling tool. This card shows an inexperienced youth setting out on a journey. The way ahead is unknown, and the youth is completely unaware of the dangers that await him. In some decks, the youth may even be shown unwittingly on the verge of stepping off a cliff. Like this archetype, Luke's character as the story begins is unformed, untested, innocent of a wider experience of the world and unaware of what lies ahead. So the hero's journey actually begins with the call to adventure, the first occurrence in a chain of events that will separate the hero from home and family. Sometimes that call comes from within the hero's own nature, and the hero will set out of his or her own accord. But usually fate brings the call, often sending a herald, a person or animal who literally carries a message that causes the journey to begin. In the Arthurian cycle, the herald appears to be as an old hermit who visits the court of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and tells them that he who will succeed in the quest for the Holy Grail is yet unborn, but will be born before the year is past. Lancelot, after hearing this, leaves the court to continue on his adventure. He comes upon an imprisoned princess, the fair Elaine, whom he frees and marries. They beget a son, Sir Galahad, who eventually embarks on the successful quest for the Holy Grail. And unbeknownst to Lancelot at the time, and to the other Knights of the Round Table, the old hermit had indeed set him on the inevitable life's course. Usually the hero does not initially recognize the hand of fate at work. The participating crisis appears accidental or even commonplace, even though it represents the opening of the hero's life into a world of unsuspected power and danger. In Star Wars, the story begins with a damsel in distress and a message gone astray. R2-D2 and C-3PO are set out to carry Leia's plea for help to Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi on the planet of Tatooine. But they are waylaid by Jawa scavengers who roam the planet searching for junk to sell. The Jawas take the droids to the Lars homestead and unintentionally becoming the hand of fate that brings the princess' message and the call to adventure to young Luke. Traditionally, a herald was a messenger of a royal personages. Now we use the word to mean not only someone who brings news, but also someone who precedes or foreshadows, a presage or harbinger. R2-D2 satisfies both these definitions, for he will not only make known to Luke the existence of the princess, but is also an omen of events to come. While he is humble and unremarkable, the little droid carries within his rusty innards the plans for the Galactic Empire's new battle station, the Death Star. In the myth of Perseus and Medusa, the hero receives a magic shield, a cap of invisibility, Hermes' sword, and a pair of winged shoes, with which to conquer the Gorgon. Here Luke acquires the plans of the Death Star as the first step towards demolishing the forces of darkness. As archetypes, the droids can be compared to aspects of the psyche. C-3PO seems to be all ego with no insight. He is fluent in over 6 million forms of communication, but while he hears everything, he seems to understand nothing. R2-D2 is more like the subconscious mind. All his power resides deep within. He can take in massive amounts of data and process them instantly, but he can only communicate with humans through signs and symbols and often relies on C-3PO's translations. R2 seems made to keep secrets, yet he is the one who draws Luke into the quest. C-3PO too acts as an unwitting herald, for his first conversation with Luke is fraught with prophecy. When Luke laments that he will never get off the farm, C-3PO asks if he can help. Luke responds, "Not unless you can alter time, speed up the harvest, or teleport me off this rock." It will indeed be the appearance of the droids that precipitates Luke's journey, catapulting him into a starship on his way to other planets. In this conversation, C-3PO calls Luke Sir Luke, and although Luke, still the innocent, laughs, by the end of the trilogy he will have matured and symbolically earned the title. Finally, 3PO says that he can tell Luke nothing of the rebellion against the Empire because I'm not much more than an interpreter and not very good at telling stories. This too will change as we see, near the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke's very name, Skywalker, reveals his destiny. While Luke's uncle seems to want to keep him on the farm, the young hero's name indicates that he is fated to travel in space. Page 30 of Star Wars: The Magic of Myth, The Wise and Helpful Guide, and the Magic Talisman. Often the young and inexperienced hero finds that in early stages of the adventure he cannot proceed without the supernatural aid. As Joseph Campbell describes it, in fairy tales his helper may be some little fellow of the wood, some wizard, hermit, shepherd, or smith, who appears to supply the amulets and advice that the hero will require. The higher mythologies develop the role in the great figure of the guide, the teacher. In the Arthurian legends, for example, the wizard Merlin plays the role of the wise and helpful guide, not only arranging for Arthur's conception and upbringing, but also him achieve the throne and instructing him in the early days of his kingship. Frequently depicted with a white beard, deep penetrating eyes, Merlin personifies the guide who holds the magical powers and foreknowledge of events that will guard and assist the young hero until he is able to continue the journey alone. In Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ben Kenobi, who looks strikingly like Merlin, is a Jedi Knight who is retired from the world to live in solitude. Well, now we know that he basically went into hiding, to go into hiding and be to guard Luke from being discovered by his father. Now he appears to save Luke's life and to offer advice, amulets, and training that Luke will need to in his quest. To begin this hero's journey, Luke needs a sense of direction, a goal. Ben's story of Luke's father, Anakin Skywalker, is rather different from the one that Luke has heard from his Uncle Owen. Luke believes that his father was a navigator on a spice freighter. Ben tells him that his father was a star pilot and a Jedi Knight. Now Luke has his goal. He aspires to become a Jedi like his father. The talisman that Ben offers is a magic sword, the lightsaber, and not just any lightsaber, but the one that belonged to Luke's father. In the myth, the magic sword is often a symbol of legitimacy. The sword passed from father to son as a sign of inheritance, an especially potent weapon, appears over and over. Siegfried, the hero of medieval Germanic epic poems, reforges his father's broken sword and uses it to slay the dragon Fanfur. This act connected him to his father's hero heritage, and he goes on to accomplish many deeds of greatness. The magic sword is a talisman laden with symbolism, an amulet that can protect a hero from evil, but it doesn't require any action on the hero's part. The hero must actively wield the sword, which means that he must not only require the skills, but also make choices. If he fights for good, the sword stands for justice. If he fights for evil, then it represents destruction. The importance of the sword to the warrior is evident in the myths of all cultures where swords were used. Arthur depends for his kingship on Excalibur, for example, which, depending on the version of the story, is either the sword he pulls from the stone or the one he receives from the Lady of the Lake. This is the sword, so sacred that it must be returned to her when he dies. Offering Luke the lightsaber is, of course, just one of Ben's tasks as a guide. He must also introduce Luke to the spiritual power known as the Force, and to its dark side, the potential to use the Force for evil. Now, all the essential elements of the quest are in place, for the Force lies at the heart of the struggles Luke will face and the triumphs he will achieve. We now know, if we ever doubted it, that the road ahead will be full of peril, for the hero must be tested. The direction will often be inscrutable, for the hero must learn and have faith, even while the adventure seems irrational. Refusal of the call. Heroes and heroines attempt to back out of a life-changing adventure so often that Joseph Campbell gave this phenomenon a name, the refusal of the call. The Greek nymph Daphne was approached by the god Apollo, but she refused his love and fled from him. Because Daphne stood fast in her rejection of adventure, her father, the river deity Peneus, changed her into a laurel tree. Her feet, but now so swift, grew fast into sluggish roots. Her head was now but a tree's top. Her gleaming beauty alone remained. When Ben retrieves Leia's message from R2 and finds that they must travel to Alderaan, Luke is no different from other heroes who hesitate on the brink. He offers a list of standard excuses. I've got to go home. I can't get involved. I've got work to do. But the hand of fate has once again done its work. When Luke rushes back to the Lars homestead, he discovers that Imperial troops have burned his home and killed his family. This event sets Luke firmly on his path. Now he has the motivation to join Ben and the droids in their attempt to rescue the princess and save the rebellion. He has literally been cut off from his old life. There's no way to go but forward. From a mythic point of view, this is the first real intimation of that the hero's journey is not just a rollicking adventure, but also involves shattering pain, loss, and despair. The final act of separation for Luke is to leave not only his home behind, but even his planet. Luke departs Tatooine thinking he will travel to Alderaan. Instead, he will wander for a number of years before completing his adventure. This is like Odysseus when he leaves Troy at the close of the Trojan War. He thinks he's going home to Ithaca, but it will take him 10 years to get there. For all mythic heroes, the journey involves trials, obstacles, victories, and setbacks. Eventually, the hero loses his traveling companions and must go alone to meet his destiny. And like Odysseus, Luke needs a ship and shipmates in order to set out. The Mos Eisley spaceport represents another threshold that Luke must cross in order to begin this journey. Here he finds danger as well as opportunity in an unlikely pair of hero partners who provide the vehicle that will carry them on their journey. The hero partner is as old as the first written hero tale, the Epic of Gilgamesh. 626 BC, the gods send Gilgamesh a rival Enkidu, but neither can best the other. They become friends. This is something that you see in Greek mythology. The famous hero partners may be the Argonauts, a group of Greeks' noblest heroes recruited by Jason to serve as the crew for the Argo and to assist in his quest for the Golden Fleece. To find their hero partners, Luke and Ben must ascend from the straits of Mos Eisley into the dark, mysterious world of the Cantina, a gathering place for spaceborne pirates and adventurers. The descent into the underworld is an archetypal passage on the hero's journey, and this visit to the Cantina is just one of the first of several descents found throughout the Star Wars trilogy. I would like to talk a little bit more about the psychological sense, but I'm going to go right into the next. The Cantina is a murky, moldy den housing a startling array of weird and exotic alien creatures and monsters. It's about examining a drop of pond water under a microscope. We find a world full of horrific-looking life forms that are fascinating all the same. But not all of the creatures found in the underworld represent negative forces. Sometimes they can be conquered, or if one knows just the right magic words, they may be helpful to the wayfarer. Benny evokes just such a character. He talks to an 8-foot-tall, savage-looking creature resembling a huge gray bush baby monkey with fierce baboon fangs, a 200-year-old Wookiee, to be exact. The fearsome animal is Chewbacca, the first mate on the Millennium Falcon. Chewie leads Ben and Luke to Han Solo, a pirate smuggler, captain of the Millennium Falcon. Through the course of the trilogy, Han will become a hero, and the arrival of Luke and Ben represents his own call to adventure. This is really, really interesting to me. The moment Luke walks into Han's life, and the moment Han walks into Luke's life, their fates, their destinies, their paths start to change. So this is the end of part 1, because this is a very sort of a long, not complicated, but detailed description of who Luke is, who his friends are, and how Luke's character is based in historical mythology and legend that has existed in human history for 10,000 years. Luke is just didn't, Luke just didn't pop up into George Lucas's head like, oh, okay, I'll write about him. This is a very deep character if you think about it, when you're looking at it from the historical, classic mythological point of view, which George Lucas did with the inspiration from Joseph Campbell. And this also is my start to explain how the Disney canon went so wrong with him and everybody else, because, like I said at the end of this, Luke not only changes in his own life, his crossing paths with Han Solo changes Han's life. Han changes Luke's life. Leia changes Luke's life, Leia changes Han's life. They change each other. This is not just a rollicking adventure. This is a sort of an emotional, growing, coming of age, good against evil story, modern mythology, based in, like I said, 10,000 years of human storytelling, classic mythology that we've all learned about in school, that has been ingrained in our brains for centuries, decades, millennia. And Disney did not respect that. But when you hire people who are not experienced in the genre, don't know anything about what Star Wars is based on, what it is not, you get, you have a problem, and that is the start of where Disney canon went wrong, is the fact that there's no one with any knowledge in the story group of Joseph Campbell or what George Lucas really attempted to do. So I want you all to buckle up, because I'm going to do more. I'm going to talk about the rescuing Leia, blowing up the Death Star, the triumph, and then the ascent back into basically hell that both Han and Luke have to go through in order to realize their own hearts and their own spirits, souls, as it were. So, this is Steph. I hope you're enjoying this. Buckle up, because it gets more involved. See you around the galaxy.